Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive, arguably civilization-defining corporate buzzword. We're asking one fundamental question that is literally rewiring the global economy. Are saving the world and making a profit actually mutually exclusive? For decades, we've been told it's an either-or scenario, but the data we're looking at today, it tells a very different story.
So let's just dive into this tension right off the bat. The old way of doing business was entirely focused on short-term profitability. Basically, next quarter's earnings at any cost. But today's global threats, from resource scarcity to shifting regulations, demand a focus on long-term survival. I mean, think about it. You can't run a profitable business on a depleted planet, and the corporate world is rapidly waking up to this reality. Section 1. Decoding the ESG Framework. What does the acronym actually mean? To wrap our heads around this complex transition, we first need to look at a verifiable set of standards used to measure sustainability credentials, which we've pulled from our Sustainability Sim source. It's called ESG. We'll start with the E, environmental. This measures how a business directly impacts the physical world around us. And we're not just talking about putting a recycling bin in the break room here. This is a deep dive into a company's actual stewardship of the planet. It tracks their waste footprint, pollution levels, animal welfare standards, and their contribution to things like deforestation and climate change. It's really about how responsibly a business interacts with natural resources. Next up is the S, social. This shifts the focus from the planet over to the people. It examines everything from factory working conditions and the eradication of child labor all the way to employee diversity and health and safety. But it importantly goes way beyond the immediate workforce, measuring a company's deep impact on local and indigenous communities. It essentially asks one big question: does this business genuinely treat humanity with dignity? And finally, we have the G, governance. This looks behind closed corporate doors to make sure the leadership is acting ethically and transparently. Governance tracks the kind of things we often don't see as consumers, right? Things like a company's tax strategy, the fairness of executive pay, political donations, lobbying efforts, anti-corruption measures, and the overall structure of their board. You can think of it as the structural integrity that holds the E and the S together. Now, when we break down the environmental aspect regarding greenhouse gases, things get incredibly interesting. Take a close look at Scope 3 down at the bottom there. See, we usually judge a company by Scope 1 and 2. That's the emissions from their own factories or the power they buy. But notice that the vast majority of emissions, we're talking around 80% for the average company, are actually hidden deep in the supply chain. So true ESG accountability requires a company to take responsibility for that massive Scope 3 slice of the pie.
Section 2, the financial power of ESG, moving beyond PR to profitability.
All right, let's address the skeptics right here and now. Does caring about these environmental and social issues actually make a company money? Or is it just an elaborate PR stunt? Well, according to our Atlas Metrics source, ESG is absolutely not a cost center. It's actually a powerful financial catalyst that drives long-term value across 3 critical pillars. First, risk management. A strong ESG framework shields against climate disruptions and massive regulatory fines. Second, revenue growth. Businesses and consumers now actively choose sustainable partners, which unlocks entirely new markets. And third, operational efficiency. Doing things like using less energy and retaining happy employees directly cuts operational costs. So, the crucial takeaway here is that investors now demand this data because robust ESG frameworks literally shield businesses from costly crises and market volatility. This isn't just about feeling good, it's about cold, hard economics. Companies that invest in proper governance and environmental initiatives are quite literally valued higher by the market, simply because they are better positioned to survive and thrive in future regulatory and economic landscapes.
Section 3. A decade of action. The Unilever case study. To see how this all works in the real world, let's zoom in on a massive global test case, Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan. Back in 2010, they set out with a first-of-its-kind ambition. They didn't just want to make marginal improvements. No, their goal was to transform their business across the entire value chain, underpinning their vision with over 70 time-bound targets, including a massive goal of halving their environmental footprint. It was a completely monumental pledge.
Section 4. Real impact, real numbers, the tangible results of the framework. 10 years later, they published the results. And this is exactly where the theoretical corporate jargon of ESG translates into human reality. We're going to start with this staggering number, over 1 billion. That figure brilliantly illustrates the social aspect of ESG.
By 2020, Unilever had reached 1.3 billion people through health and hygiene programs. Brands like Lifebuoy and Domestos literally altered the health outcomes of billions by promoting hand washing to reduce life-threatening diarrheal diseases and providing safe drinking water. They basically used their massive marketing scale to trigger enduring positive changes in everyday habits.
Next, we have nearly a complete elimination of a major problem. Down 96%. From an environmental standpoint, they completely overhauled their manufacturing processes, reducing total waste sent for disposal by 96% compared to 2008 levels. They actually achieved zero non-hazardous waste to landfill across their entire factory network. This is a perfect textbook example of what Atlas Metrics meant by ESG driving operational efficiency and cost reduction.
And then there's this figure, representing millions of people empowered. Tying right back to the social and governance pillars, this massive push enhanced livelihoods across their extended global supply chain. They enabled 2.63 million women to access initiatives aimed at promoting safety, developing skills, and expanding opportunities. It proves, without a doubt, that corporate influence can be a powerful tool for social equity when governed correctly.
But, as this explainer promises to show, we really have to look at the full picture. It wasn't a perfect success story. Despite all their efforts, their water impact per consumer use showed a 0% reduction over the decade. 0. While their factory water numbers were great, they learned a pretty harsh reality. Changing consumer daily habits, like try convincing a teenager to take a shorter shower, right, is incredibly difficult.
Section 5. Hard Lessons in Sustainability. What Unilever learned from a decade of messy reality. Because of these hurdles, Unilever didn't just hide their failures. Instead, they published their biggest takeaways so the rest of the business world could learn from their messy reality. First, they learned you have to make sustainable living effortless for consumers. People want to do good, for sure, but they heavily prioritize convenience. Second, an individual company can't change the system alone. You have to advocate for broader policy and industry-wide systems change, like pushing for renewable energy grids. Third, measuring social impact is highly complex and requires totally new standardized metrics. And fourth, the world moves incredibly fast, and companies have to be agile enough to respond to rapid environmental and social shifts.
Which leaves us with this final thought. The ESG framework proves that profitability and planetary survival really can align. But, as we saw with the water reduction challenges, this whole framework relies entirely on us, the stakeholders. The corporate world responds to our demands. So, as consumers, voters, and investors, what choices will you make today to hold the corporate world accountable tomorrow? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.